So, hello everyone. For those of you who missed it, I was just saying we've come to a point now where our major architectural concerns have been addressed. There are still some details to be worked out, but nothing that there's nothing that is an open question that can affect the overall architecture. Um, so going forward, at least until we finish the API review, I think it makes sense to have these meetings be a sort of update or a place for vendors and developers to come and ask questions or figure out how to contribute and things like that. What do you all think about that?
I guess another way
Jiffin
of
here.
asking it, Sid, would be: are people comfortable with status update type meetings and us moving forward, even though the API hasn't been approved? And I, you know, so is that it's sort of what the priority of this meeting should be.
Yeah, was someone else saying? Oh, Jeff, there's echo coming from. Could you mute yourself for a second? Okay, so yeah, that's a good question, Jeff. Maybe I should explain myself better here. So our priority is still getting the API approved. That being said, there are some parts of the API that are still clear, that are definitely not going to change. Like our primary distribution of resources, buckets, bucket accesses, bucket classes, bucket access classes, and then the request objects for both these types. Um, so if someone were to come in and ask us how they would go about writing a driver, we can point them to the sample driver. If someone were to come in asking how they can start contributing, we can help them do that. Or if a vendor is looking to figure out how to add a certain feature, we can talk about that. Um, However, in terms of architecture itself, um, at least for the core of it, we are in consensus about how we want to move forward. Jeff, if you're talking, you muted.
Yeah, I want to keep the echo down. That's fine, Sid.
Okay. Does that answer your question though?
Yes, I missed a couple of meetings because I was on uh, PTO, so I'm not up. I'm not up current right now.
Mhm. Yeah, so yeah, I'll be happy to give you an update. Can you help me remember what was the last thing we were discussing when you were here?
Give me a couple seconds and I'll
Okay,
tell
no
you.
worries. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to discuss today. So Krish came up with a good idea to write down whatever we want to discuss in a document, like for that meeting. So I've shared the document in our SIG storage cozy channel. Um, so that would be, for instance, a place to put our meeting agendas for the day. It's also pinned, the same document is pinned to the SIG storage cozy channel. So anyone who wishes to bring up something, please add your uh, uh, comments, or please add whatever you'd like to talk about as an entry in that document. And to start off, Jiffin and Jeff brought up an issue that I think needs to be worked out. Um, Jeff, this is about bucket ownership that you brought up. Did you want to explain that, or Jiffin, did you want to explain that?
Um,
In regards to the Ceph driver, I believe.
yeah, Jiffin, you can go ahead and I can add anything that.
So basically Sid Jiffin here. So while
Mhm.
developing the Ceph driver, am I audible? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Ah, okay. So while developing the Ceph driver, one of the main concern or main question was who owns the bucket, like whether we had to, like in a bucket request, when it comes to a driver, should we create a user or owner for the bucket, or should we create a like one single user who will create all the buckets? So that's a question which was raised, and there was some scalability issue from I I would say maybe from RW point of view, like uh, having lot of users for a single bucket may not work.
Mhm.
Like having a lot of buckets for a user works fine, but if you're having a lot of users pointing to the same bucket, it can, like, it's the general concern with Surface. We can leave about that. But basically so they were a bit concerned like who owns the bucket in a bucket request. That was the idea, and
Mhm.
whether can we have store save that information in the bucket request, or not in the bucket request, at least uh, whether it's easable to fetch or something like that. So when a bucket access request comes, so that the bucket access request have an idea who is the owner of the bucket, something like that. So
I
those
see.
are two concerns which were raised during our, like, still on the development, or like when I pushed the PR, this are questions which was raised.
Okay.
And I think Jeff had did a like nice write up all the I, most of the docs, most of the things Jeff mentioned the doc, which I am also interested, like about the opaque field and yeah, even bucket ownership. Then green field, brown field scenarios. I am still like maybe I'm missing the entire picture, but I still don't have the fully grasped the idea like who owns the bucket and bucket request, who owns the bucket access request, who owns the bucket access, all those stuff.
Understood.
So
Okay.
so that's what,
Mhm.
yeah, which I want to share, like which I want to say.
Okay. Okay, can I summarize what you just said and let me know if I'm getting it right? So the first concern you brought up was you're trying to figure out if there is a way to have a user per bucket, um, and or have a single user for all the buckets, or a set of users for a group of buckets, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, And in your context, you're saying it is much more, it might be a scalability concern if you had lots of users for a single bucket, right? Instead of
Yeah.
a lot of buckets for a single user.
Mm.
Is that right?
Uh, yeah, that's, I think we can. We don't know that is there an issue with that, but we need to, like, they raise that concern. That's it. Like
Okay.
I think that will be the, if there are a lot of bucket tax requests, right? If you have 100 bucket tax requests, there will be 100 users. It should be ideally the COSI model should work in such a way that
Hmm.
like each bucket tax request should have a user, right? At least at the backend.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
And
So, was there another concern that you raised, or is that these two?
Yeah, I like two information. Basically, so one of the issue is who owns the bucket. Like, it's up to a driver at the moment. There's no real or like concrete or ironed out like who owns the bucket part. Second part is like currently the bucket access. Sorry, the bucket glass has the opaque field, right?
Mhm.
uh, like which will be inherited to the bucket request and even to the bucket, or like maybe to the bucket, not to the bucket request.
Mhm.
But if driver want to save some information with respect to a bucket or something like that, uh,
Mhm.
currently there is no opaque field or something like that, which like it won't be like useful, or like it, like COSI won't want to know about that information. Like it's just an opaque field similar to the bucket class. Like if you can say something else for the COSI driver, so that if say bucket access request comes, we can refer that field or something like that.
So
Uh,
that would help you somehow specify this is the user for which this bucket is requested,
yeah,
right?
something like that at the moment.
Yes.
Like
Okay.
yeah,
So there's a very specific reason we chose not to have opaque fields in our API objects, and that is portability. So if we start having opaque fields, say a generic parameters field of map string, then we would lose portability because a customer, drivers will start having support for custom labels there, basically. Like Ceph labels will be different from another
Ah,
S3 store's label. So
okay.
bucket request, if we were to start having parameters in there, we would lose portability, which is a very important concern for us. Now, that's why we understand that people still need portability, and that's why we give that ability through the bucket class. I mean, sorry, we understand that people still need the ability to set opaque parameters. That's why we have the parameters field in bucket class. Now, that adds a admin step, and because bucket class is a cluster scoped object, and we say that because it's an admin step, it is reasonable to expect the admin um, to work with two different systems, and not expect out of the box portability. Like it's okay to expect the admin to configure parameters specifically for whatever driver they're running the current system with. um,
Okay.
yeah,
So,
go ahead.
but I still, sorry, like maybe I don't have much knowledge. Like I don't fully understand. Like if it's an opaque field, like why it will be a portability issue? Like the
Okay.
driver needs, like it depends on driver, right? Like whether if the driver runs on, it should like Azure Kubernetes or like OpenShift in whatever platform, a
Mhm.
driver, if it's handled from the driver, how it become a portability issue? That part I'm not bit unclear.
Yeah, so I see what you mean. So let's take the S3 protocol.
Mm.
So the way we've defined portability is for a given protocol, you should just be able to move your workload definitions from one um, driver to another. Sorry, from one provider
Okay.
to another.
Oh, okay, okay.
So if you
Uh,
add self-specific fields for S3, and let's say I go run it on AWS, which won't
uh,
understand the self-specific fields, the behavior will be different. So that's how it loses portability.
I know, like what I want to say, like the opaque fields, like it should not be uh, what what I'm trying to say was like it should not be a, like it should not depend on the workload, like workload, or like if the user can define the field apart from that, like it should work as, like if AWS, in AWS, if it is working as like this, it should work similar. Like what I mean, the application should not be aware of that opaque field, right? Like
Yeah,
uh,
so on the application level, application is the same as user level, right? Like
yeah,
the yeah. So at that level, we can't expect them to know the fields that needs to be set for one driver versus the other. At
yeah,
that layer,
that's
we
true.
just say they request an S3 bucket. And how it happens in the backend is something that the admin knows about. The admin knows that, it's the actual buckets are being provisioned by either S3 itself, AWS S3 itself, or Ceph or something else.
Uh,
So that's where we're coming from. The loss of portability happens when we go from one provider to another for the same protocol.
okay.
And the idea being, if a user has to know what the backend provider is, uh, you know,
Hmm.
that's not how current
Ah,
uh,
that's
roles are
true.
divided.
I agree with that. Like the user should not know what the backend provide or something like that. That's true. I agree with that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
but does that answer your question? Like why we designed the bucket request and bucket access request to not have opaque fields?
that part I'm still like fully. I don't like. I
Okay,
don't fully understand your concern. That like
okay.
having opaque fields. Like even if it's at say uh, the fields are managed by admin or like storage admin, something like that, or like only
Mhm.
who he can define something. I like so currently the bucket class has it, right? So
Mhm. Yeah.
uh,
So bucket class is a clustered resource. So you can specify custom fields in the bucket class.
hmm,
All we're saying is for user-defined resources, um,
okay,
they should just expect portability out of the box. the idea is we don't expect users to have to know about whatever the backend is, or
Hmm.
they should just be able to take their workload from one cluster. Let's say it fails, so they just take the YAMLs, put it in another cluster, and it should just work.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And to satisfy that use case, we decided not to have any opaque fields in the user-defined objects like bucket request and bucket access
Uh,
request.
okay. So I understand your point. So if I understand correctly, so this is another like which part which I'm not fully understand. So the bucket request is user defined. Like it's not admin driven. I thought like admin have the power to do the bucket request and the user can only ask request for bucket access request.
Yeah, the bucket request and bucket access requests are user definable. If a user wants to request a new bucket, they can do it through the bucket request. We have had conversations just very recently, actually,
Hmm.
um, to make bucket creation admin only operation. But with the current way things are done, that would fit. However, one of our responsibility is also to push the needle forward. uh, you
Okay.
know make the make bucket availability, or make buckets available in a self-service model.
Hmm.
The idea being, object storage is at one point, or object storage is necessary for applications to become stateless. The current applications that try to manage state and that don't really have to, like web servers and any API servers, um, they can. The idea is if they're using object storage, they themselves, the instance of the web storage and API service, web servers and API servers, and just any other application that can afford to put their data in object storage should do it.
Okay.
But then they themselves become stateless. So coming from this perspective, people who are deploying web servers and API servers, the users should just request a bucket and not rely on an admin to give them a bucket.
Okay. So
They're
and but
enabling that use case.
so the bucket who is created by a user, like if I understand correctly, uh, like you can refer it any on any bucket access request, right? There's no specific control over there, right? Or like the named,
Yes,
I forgot the name.
namespace control by default.
Like it applies for the, so the bucket access request need to be on the same, like only if it belongs to the same namespace it can access the bucket request or something like that is the uh,
Something like
rough.
that. So yeah, by default, that permission is given. Now,
Okay.
when creating the bucket, the admin can set in the bucket class what are all the namespaces where buckets can be shared.
Hmm.
So if the admin designates 5 namespaces out of 10 namespaces in the cluster, then bucket access requests in the all 5 namespaces can access the bucket.
Okay. Okay. Irrespective of the user who creates the bucket. Okay.
Right.
Oh, I mean bucket request. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for
Right. So that's
clearing
the
it.
boundary between admin and user.
Um,
Does that
so
clarify a little bit more, maybe?
yeah, yeah, sure. So currently the bucket acts, sorry, bucket class will be created by the admin, and bucket request and bucket access request can be created by the user.
Mhm.
So, and another question, like why do you need a bucket access class? That's another thing which I always wondered, like do we really need a bucket access class or something like that? Like the access request can refer the bucket request, right? Why
That's
do
a
you need
very,
a
yeah. So, if anything, we want to get rid of. Okay, so there is a technical reason for it. We need a So bucket is a global object,
hmm,
and we need a global reference, a global object reference to all the accessors that use a particular bucket.
okay,
Mapping a non-namespace resource like a bucket to a bunch of namespace bucket access, assuming bucket access didn't exist, we'd have
hmm,
to map the bucket access request to the bucket. And that kind of binding has historically been troublesome in Kubernetes.
Okay.
I can't quickly remember what were the clear reasons, but I
Wait,
do remember this. Sorry.
wasn't the question about the BAC?
Yeah. Why have a BAC? Because
I think
oh oh
it
he
was
was asking why a BAC, not BA. Okay, never mind.
yeah.
Sorry, good point, Ben. So a BAC exists eh, mostly to define the boundary of what kind of um, access someone's allowed to get. So let me see.
Like you could imagine having one BAC for full control of a bucket and another BAC for read-only access. And the admin could set those both up ahead of time, and then a user could have some BARs for full control and some BARs for read-only. Without BACs, there would be no difference from one BAR to the next. They would all just refer to the same bucket. They'd all get different credentials, but they would all result in the exact same thing. So BACs allow you to have different
Okay.
levels of access.
But I think he's asking why couldn't we do that from the BAR itself?
Yeah, that was my
You, you,
question. So
you could, but there's expected to be opaque stuff in there that that the admin might want to set up at the BAC level, and this just gives you sort of a menu selection way of doing it. Like this is one of the parts of Cozy that's relatively poorly defined, I think, is what
Mhm.
exactly goes into the BAC. And we should probably flesh it out more with a lot of examples and stuff. But in principle, it's meant to allow you to give people a menu of choices like full control and read only or something like that.
yeah, okay, understood. But the higher level, like uh, from higher level of point of view, like the first admin need to create the bucket class BC, then user will create a BR, which will create a B. Then admin need to create the BAC, like that's the workflow, right? Currently, which we are
Right.
recommending. Then only user can use. I feel like a bit
Oh,
unnecessary dependency there, but that's
right.
my
No, it's a fair question. I just remembered why we have it. So we're going to get rid of policy actions config map. That's what we decided. So this is
okay.
not going to be there. So levels of access, we don't have a, yeah. So the BAC exists to pass in these opaque parameters. Right now, that's all it does.
Hmm.
And in principle, you can have different levels of access determined by the parameters. I think Sid, we weren't just going to remove the policy action config map, but replace it with something that made more sense. And I don't know if we got that far
Was
in the
it a
design.
config map or no? I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was. Um, I need to go back and look. Jeff.
What? Jeff is on mute.
There, what's it?
So do you remember what we decided for the policy actions config map? Did we decide to get rid of it, or did we decide to?
We, yes, I think we didn't like the idea of referencing another object from the BAC, and I think the consensus at one of the meetings was we should just embed what we wanted. The reason we directly in the PACs have them as fields, but the reason we didn't do that originally was because we wanted to give the admin the flexibility that you can get with a config map. So essentially, it is opaque in the sense that the config map can define any key values. And then we would just reference that config map
Right.
in the
But
BAC. And if that's not a good idea, we can either try to find commonality, which has always been a challenge in this project between the different object stores, or we can have a config string map in the BAC that would be equivalent to the config map.
you mean like the opaque parameters,
Yeah,
right? Which is a string map.
you want the BAC to give the admin flexibility to get the right type of access policy in place.
Yeah.
For
The question is how much commonality can there be from one provider to another at the BAC level? Obviously, if we make everything opaque, it doesn't matter. But if there's anything that could be made common, you'd want to think about a way of putting it here. My main objection to the config map was just that config maps are namespaced, and these objects are not namespaced, and and there was some documentation that suggested like a certain format for what should go in the config map, and if it's supposed to be opaque, we should just leave it completely opaque and say, look, you put what you want there. We don't have an opinion as a community about what goes in the opaque fields.
So you're saying you shouldn't put opaque fields in a config map?
Oh, I'm saying you shouldn't document what the contents of an opaque field should contain because it's opaque.
Right, right.
And a config map in particular, just having a non-namespace object point to a namespaced object felt very strange to me, because
Right,
what
right.
namespace is that object in? And
Right.
and if a user has access to read BACs and they're going through and looking at them, like, can they read the things that the BACs point to?
Or delete it first.
Or delete it. Yeah, I mean, there's all those questions. So it's like a VAC should be self-contained, I think. If there is a legitimate reason why a simple string map of opaque parameters doesn't give driver authors and administrators enough power to do what they want to do, then we could have a problem. But I think we should find the gap before we try to solve it with engineering. Otherwise,
Okay. Was someone
otherwise
saying something? Go ahead.
Ah,
You should.
so this is like, I just want to mention, like, if you are offering a policy kind of stuff, like having some policies, say I can read the contents or something like that, it makes sense to have it on BR than on, I mean, on the bucket than the bucket access request. Like, so the driver have more control over that. Like if it's on the,
So,
if you are
okay.
defining policies on the bucket access request, like I feel like you are giving like there are two levels or something like that. Like, so it's a
yeah,
at the back.
so
If that was the case, how would I have different types of access? So let's say within one namespace, I want to allow users to be able to write to buckets, and the other namespace, I just want to allow them to read. Like I wouldn't be able to do it
Okay.
if
From
I put in the
okay,
bucket.
fine.
Sorry?
From names, yeah, I understood.
Yeah. The other question that you asked, I think, is very interesting, which is why not have the policy actions config map in the BR? Why have uh, why have a class level field for that? That's a good question, actually.
it's about portability again. Like,
I see. Yeah, because this is opaque.
we don't have a common way of defining access policies that would make sense across every implementation.
Right.
So if you want to declare a class called read only,
Mhm.
the implementation of the class may look wildly different on different implementations. And so
That's
all
true.
you can do is just tell your user, hey, use this class to mean read only, and the admin has set it up appropriately. It would be great if we could find some common language that would give end users more control over the policy than just picking from a menu. But I don't think we've convinced ourselves that that's possible. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it is. Maybe we can make a declaration that like all S3 implementations have to support the following, JSON style policy format.
It doesn't
And
really work because this is not S3. This is access control. That's the issue with this.
right, but this is how access control in many S3 implementations works. Is with like they have a certain
So we
policy.
can't force, say, Ceph. Ceph uses its own access control
Oh
mechanism.
yeah. Well, that's where I was going. Is many use the same, but not all. And
Right.
so we have to make the decision: do we want to force everyone, or do we want to accept the ones that don't conform? And if we do, then any kind of standard is off the table. We just have to say, look, you pick from a menu.
Wouldn't that be up to the driver to convert that?
Yeah, but I mean, the important thing is the end user experience. Does he just pick from a menu, or does he get to specify something else? Unless we can enforce a standard that works across the board, your only choice is pick from a menu, and the admin has to wire up the menu for you.
Okay, so there are two issues we saw. One is the different formats or different types of access control mechanisms that different drivers have. Another is just the complexity of access control. that these drivers provide. Take AWS, for example. They allow very complex styles of access definitions using the IAM policy definition YAMLs. You could say within one file, you could say you can access some subdirectories in certain ways, some other subdirectories in different ways. You can delete some. You can mix and match pretty much any way you want. It's very powerful, but also cumbersome. I don't know if we should be abstracting that level of access control. Now, if we said we'll go with a simpler model, then would we be restrictive at that point? Or is it okay to say, whatever we don't support, you can do it yourself using parameters?
Well, we're removing the power from the hands of users to administrators
Right,
by putting it in the class.
right.
And there's plenty of Kubernetes clusters where the end user is the administrator, and so he has the power to do both things. And he'll just, if he cares, he'll go set up the classes with all the special rules he wants, and then use the classes like he wants inside his cluster. But none of what he does will be portable, because he'll rely on his bucket access classes or bucket classes.
What if we said we will abstract policy actions config map, a rudimentary one, and if you want any more advanced levels of access control, just use opaque parameters.
Well, how is that different than what we're actually doing? I don't.
Move the policy actions config map, the abstracted, the standardized version into the bucket access request. So let's say we said, here are the three types of access we allow: read only, read write, and write only. And these can be specified in the bucket access request. If you want any more complex levels of access, talk to your admin and get it done through the bucket access class.
Oh, you mean the only handle we would give to end users would be like those three choices?
Something like that. Something like that.
But the problem, the problem with that is, what does read write mean? What does read only? What does write only mean on any particular? I mean, it would force driver implementers to basically come up with a cookie cutter policy that meant that thing.
So the trade-off is, yeah, that's true. So the trade-off is, if we wanted to give any power to the user to specify what kind of access they want, that we'll end up doing it at the cost of these cookie cutter policies.
This feels like the kind of problem that you solve after you have some deployments and people using it, and then people complaining that like it's too cumbersome, and then you're like, okay, we need a way to standardize the really common access policies.
Right.
I don't know if we can get the right answer from where we're standing now.
So I want to hear from Jeff or Jiffin. So, given that the access policy in Ceph is very different from other standardized S3 stores, like Minayo, for instance, allows the IAM style access policy definitions. So whatever Amazon supports, we support, but that's not the case with Ceph. The access control is done differently. Would it still work for you guys?
Not really. It's
Okay,
similar
go
to
on.
Amazon only. So whatever.
Oh, you do Amazon as well?
Yeah. So Ceph initially had ACLs, but we are not kind of supporting or something like that. Now we are using the bucket policy or user policy, which is similar to like IAM policy or whatever it is, like AWS.
Is it similar or the exact same definition?
Okay. So that I may need to check, but I feel like it's similar only. Like you can set the policy via S3 APIs.
Okay.
So,
And Scality, Vianney, how does the access control look like in Scality? Do you support IAM style access control?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Compatible, yeah.
Interesting.
So Sid, we also support Amazon style access control, but I think that the underlying issue here is that everyone who supports it, I think they do so by just like reading the Amazon docs and copying what they did. I don't think that there's a standard written down anywhere that you can conform to. And,
Right.
and the other problem is nothing stops Amazon from changing the way they do things tomorrow and everyone being non-conformant.
And also it wouldn't work on GCS or Azure, which have S3 compatibility modes.
Well, that they might, I don't know, but I mean, this is what Andrew Large was getting at when he was suggesting that maybe what we need is to like define some widely supported subset of S3 and then like standardize that and give it a different name so that all the S3 compatible vendors don't live in fear that Amazon will change their mind tomorrow and make them not S3 compatible. You know, we could, but that's a sort of a loftier goal that Andrew
Yeah.
had, because
No, yeah.
there isn't an open standard with any kind of process around S3. It's just whatever Amazon decides to do, a bunch of other companies copy that, and we end up chasing them around.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are the standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's usually the grace period, right? When they make a change, there's a year or 2 years for everyone to catch up before they deprecate the old way of doing things.
Yeah, and you know, if we do a new standard, we add more noise to the problem. I think.
Yeah.
But this is the same problem we had a decade ago with, you know, Microsoft and Mozilla fighting over JavaScript and like what is JavaScript, and they eventually someone just invented a standard called like ECMA, and then like that just became the standard because you need something that's not proprietary and that's written down to have a you know a common compatibility. I think
So,
Andrew Large was suggesting going in a direction like that to say, look, everyone's trying to implement the same thing, but it's not written down anywhere. So let's write it down and then declare that to be the thing that we're all conforming to.
well, you know, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would point to the AWS API docs and say that is the standard that everybody that we should be conforming to. If you're talking S3, then it's AWS is the standard.
I don't think this is how you standardize, right? Standardize means.
I think we're losing you. Maybe it's just on my side, but your voice
was that guy trying to talk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He faded away.
That first of all, how you right?
Guy, your voice
Can
is.
you hear me?
No, we can't really hear you, Guy.
Okay. Sorry. I don't know if it's better now.
It's better.
It's better.
Okay. I just want to say that I think standards is both agreeing that this, you know, version is good enough, but then also understanding how enhancements will happen on that. And I think we don't have that if we just point to Amazon.
Right.
And,
right. I mean, for now, everyone is just pointing to Amazon and it's good enough, but Amazon is the only entity empowered to make changes. And that's not a great situation for everyone else.
Well, a standard is needed, like, you know, in case of JavaScript, a standard was needed because we had multiple competing parties which were doing things their own way. Right now, the world is standardizing on S3. Do you suppose that if we came up with a new, we're not going to work on the data part of it. We're just going to work on the provisioning and access parts of it. So given that, and given that others, for the data parts at least, others are standardizing around S3, do you still think there's a need for us to standardize?
I'm not taking up that mantle. That was Andrew's thing. I thought it was a great idea, but obviously it's a huge job to try to sort of write down everything that S3 is in a standards doc and put governance around it and create an organization to own it. And
I think people have tried this before and it hasn't worked. Swift APIs.
Somebody has to really want it. Someone has to be willing to pour lots of money into that.
You would have to convince AWS.
Right.
That's the big thing, right? It would have to come with AWS on board.
I don't think so. You just need to write an SDK and maintain it. I don't think
data.
You just need to fight over the clients basically.
Yeah, this is not the point of Cozy. It was just something that came up in the context of Cozy discussions. Until someone decides to go do that, we're stuck with, just whatever Amazon says is the standard, and we have to decide if Cozy wants to also inherit that, blind obedience to whatever it says in the AWS docs, or if we want to, draw our own line in the sand and say this is what we do.
I mean, strategically speaking, we're modeling what the world looks like right now. Taking our own stance might be too big of a bite.
Well, no. Sorry, maybe I suggested something I didn't mean to suggest. What I'm saying is, if we leave it all opaque, the problem goes away, right? Because then if the S3 standard were to fragment in any way, it would be somebody else's problem, right? It would be a vendor by vendor fragmentation. It wouldn't be a Cozy problem. If we try to say whatever the AWS docs say is a access policy, that's what we're going to support, then the problem you're going to have is people will believe that, and then if someone doesn't implement it exactly right, it'll just break. Or if it changes over time and someone doesn't keep up, it'll just break. And then that'll be our problem, because we'll have said, hey, we're supporting the standard, and everyone who claims S3 compatibility is going to use the same standard, but it's not implemented the same everywhere. And so, caveat emptor. That's not a good situation to have, I don't think. So like making it opaque just says, hey, it's up to the admin to go figure out how to implement a read-only policy or a write-only policy or a full control policy. And it might happen to be the same
I agree.
across the board. And maybe in Cozy 2.0, we'll standardize that.
Yeah.
I think it's just for the next kip. I mean, it doesn't have to be like, the next major version. Like, we just need to have enough understanding of what policies are interesting for Kubernetes to define, and not just, it's true that customers want to define a lot of things, but the reason, the question is what matters to defining inside Kubernetes to be able to manage, to orchestrate. Not every tiny bit of option that you might have in an IAM, in a generic IAM, makes sense to Kubernetes to know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm betting that,
Right,
I actually don't know the history of PVCs, but I'm betting that when PVCs were first invented, they were all RWO, and that access modes got added later for read-only ones and for read-write-many ones. And that kind of thing can get grafted on in later revisions.
That's exactly how it came.
Yeah, if your first version is, look, every time you create a bucket or every time you create a BAR, you're going to get the full control access policy or whatever it is the admin put in the BAC, then like that's a good starting point, and then you can branch out from there.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So what's the final agreement? We just have parameters. Do we still want policy actions config map as an opaque field?
No, you have to get rid of the config map.
Yeah. Just opaque field.
I mean, you could have an opaque field that was vendor specific, that was like the name of a config map in a specific namespace, and then the driver could go read that if it wanted the full flexibility of a config map. But I wouldn't want to institutionalize that in the formal API, because you can't remove it.
Right, and if they still want to do that, they can specify it in parameters as something they understand. Like it could be like, in CSI, in the parameters you can specify something dot, like kts.io.csi/ secret name and secret namespace, and then the CSI driver or the CSI provisioner goes and fetches these two things, the secret and secret name, and then gives it to the driver. We could do something like that if it's absolutely needed.
Oh,
I mean?
right. You're talking about the way that the secrets can work with storage classes.
Right.
Yeah.
Worst case, I'm saying we don't even have to do that yet, but based on how people use it, if it comes down to that point where we need to support it, we have a tried and tested method.
Yep. We can suggest that the keys in the opaque map should be namespaced. That is something that we can document about the opaque map, is a recommendation to namespace things to avoid collisions.
Yeah. Okay. So so we're gonna get rid of policy actions config map. I like that. Coming back to Jiffin's question, so we need a mechanism to specify parameters, and that's the only reason for a bucket access class right now.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Jiffin?
Yeah, but if there's a parameter field, like if it's a, like what I want to say is, at least this should be, user can request or user need to, like if it's a bucket access class parameter, the opaque field, then admin has the control, right? If I need to, if from a user point of view, if I need to request something, that's a bit difficult to do at the moment, right? You can only just follow what admin says.
Yeah, that is definitely slightly inconvenient right now.
And it's going to be driver specific too.
Yeah.
Right? The drivers could choose to
there's-
implement,
that's
could choose to have no flexibility whatsoever, and drivers could just say, hey, every BAR is going to be full control. We're going to ignore all the parameters, and that's all you get. Whereas a different vendor could decide to make a very powerful, abstraction in the BAC where you can specify all kinds of policy details, and then it just becomes driver dependent. So you have to know what driver you have to know what's possible, and that's the kind of thing an admin would do.
Yeah, I agree, but like it should be a bit convenient if there's some option for the user. So that was my point. Like if they can request something from their point, like if there's some option, like from the usability point of view, at least from what my experience in OBC and OP workloads. That was just
Object bucket classes and object buckets. This is the
object
OpenShift abstractions for buckets, right?
Not really. So Jeff developed it, like Jeff had the idea, and it was again an abstraction over the bucket. That's it. So one of the major difference is there's no. So here there's bucket access and bucket access. Sorry, bucket request and bucket access, right? For OBC, we don't have that difference. It's only like object bucket. Like it's maybe like you can say it's equivalent to bucket request at some point. Maybe it can be equivalent to bucket access request at some point.
So
But yeah.
let me put it this way. So we have the same issues with PVCs and storage classes today, but I don't know if many people have found that to be a big usability concern. Maybe Ben knows a little bit more about it in terms of what people think about it. Like, have there been any issues raised with having these opaque fields only possible via storage classes in case of PVCs?
No, I mean it's how you get portability.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think portability is more valuable here.
Okay.
Yeah, the NetApp driver can have all kinds of special options, but like someone who's creating a PVC should never know what those are because they want their well, in maybe not everyone, but at least a lot of users would want their PVCs to be portable to a non-NetApp storage controller. For the ones that really do, want to tie themselves to the vendor specific options, then they would need admin powers, but they're not doing portable things anyways. So, that's when you cross that line.
Yeah. So that's where portability is the main reason we take that driver specific, vendor specific configurability away from the request objects and put it into the classes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So coming back to your bucket ownership question, so currently with Cozy, if you wanted to specify some parameter for for the bucket owner, for each bucket that you create, right now, either the driver can do it using some form of agreement with the user. So something like if the BR starts with say XYZ, then make it a user, make it belong to user XYZ or something. That's one way. I wouldn't recommend that. It's kind of a hack. The other way is create a bucket class for every bucket, which needs a unique user, and that might be something that's more workable. But if you go ahead.
Okay, understood. Like I
Yeah.
need to check the bucket class. Like if the bucket class is the use the like it's a connection between bucket class and the user, something like that.
Owner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the default recommended approach that we've been asking people to follow, or that we ourselves have been following, is to make the driver uh, be the owner. So the driver has to represent a service account in the backend,
Mm.
and that service account will be the owner of the bucket.
Okay. So there will be single owner for the driver who owns all the buckets which are created by the driver, something like
Right.
that.
Right.
So that's the approach which I took. So that's where the questions were asked. Like, why do you want to do like this way?
Yeah. If there is any of these design decisions preventing you from moving forward, like if it ends up being something that is completely unworkable for, say, Ceph or any other driver, then that's something we have to address. Um, However, in this situation, we do have a few workarounds, um, and if there are still issues, please bring it back up, and we'll resolve them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still we are on the development phase, right?
Yeah.
So it comes while deciding like how it should look. That's why the questions will ask, and
That's
we'll
very
see.
good, actually. We encourage that. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, no
Thanks, man.
problem. All right, so that was the main thing on the agenda today. Um, Other than this, I can give an update on where we are in terms of the KEP. Let me open that up. Yeah, here. So I've simplified it quite a bit, and here's the architecture diagram that I have, that defines what our architecture looks like. Uh,
Oh, hello. Can you still hear me?
okay, I pressed something and my screen just went blank. Can people still hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so this is what the architecture looks like, and please let me know if you see any inconsistencies here from what we've been designing. But at the 10,000 feet picture looks like this. I've I've messed up some connection on my machine. Okay, so there's the cozy controller manager, and that interacts with the Kubernetes API. And on each node we have the node adapter, and we have the provisioner sidecar that runs alongside the driver. And the driver provisioner sidecar talks to the Kubernetes API, and the driver talks to the object storage provider. It's a simple connection here. Makes sense, right? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a yes. And similar to that, I've just been making things clear. I was actually worried a little bit that I'm drawing too many diagrams, but I think it's actually under control. Just for the most major, most important uh, 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 definitions, there's going to be a diagram,
So
or
wh-
most important things that can be visually represented. Sorry, go ahead.
why does the protocol subfield have its own children? I thought we
Oh,
said it was just going to be like an enum.
no. No, we didn't say that actually. We said one of the three has to be whichever is defined is the right one. We got out of the enum approach quite a while back, because each protocol has some fields that need to be specified.
Right, but then how how do I have any portability if I'm putting regions in my bucket requests?
These are all standardized, so the bucket can still be in US East 1. So
Can
you're
I
saying,
well, I guess the important question is, can I omit them if I just want an S3 bucket and I don't care?
yeah,
If you don't define it, it goes to whatever the object store's default is.
which is US East 1 in case
Usually.
Amazon.
Okay, so I can use it as an enum by leaving everything blank except for the S3 marker. And then the question is, like, are these things that you should be able to set on a per BR basis?
Yeah. So we had this conversation, I think, just a few weeks back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we agreed that the protocol should be on the BR and not the BC, but yeah, I still signature version. Just feels weird to make that a per BR thing.
Well, only the BR knows what kind of signature the application's
No,
gonna use.
yeah, I mean, I agree
Stuff
with
like
that, but like in the situation where like the system can't give you what you want, you're just gonna get BR doesn't bind. And like, is that a good situation to basically say I need S3v4, and if I can't get it, it just shouldn't bind?
I thought that's what we had decided.
Yeah.
Just thinking. Feels strange. Well, maybe the signature version feels less strange than the region.
But either way, I mean, if you don't care, you can leave those blank.
Yeah.
Right. It's only if your application required that signature version, then you would only want to be able to bind to an object store that can accept that signature version.
Yeah. I guess the reason the region particularly bothers me is because we have other ways of handling this with pods and PVCs.
Yeah, topology doesn't matter as much when you're talking over the network.
Except when it does, right? Like, to the extent that you care about where your bucket is, it's a topological concern that you have, right? If you don't have any topology concerns, then you shouldn't care what region your bucket is in.
Correct.
So if I really care that my bucket is in US East 1 and not US West 1, then like that's a topology decision that I'm making for my bucket. So
You're
it
saying
just
that should
feels,
also influence where the pod runs?
well, it just feels weird to have it pushed all the way down in the S3 protocol, because Kubernetes does have a concept of topology and availability zones and things like that.
We've brought this up before. Even in that case, it might